May 27, 2006. It is just before 6 a.m. Our documentary team is filming at the base of Mount Merapi, the most active and dangerous volcano in Indonesia.
That day started like most mornings. It was nice and clear. The clouds that started forming that came out of the volcano, they call them shaggy goats. These big billowy clouds. Well, those were bigger than we had ever seen before.
Well, what we've got is rolling smoke.
Yeah, good. But the other thing was that the avalanche of rocks that started coming down seemed to be going lower down the mountain than it had before. So that's when we started to get concerned. It's going to get big. Wow.
Nature is unleashing its fury.
All of a sudden, everything just started shaking. It was actually quite frightening. It just felt like something really big was in the process of happening.
As our cameras are rolling, what we don't know is that we are actually capturing an earthquake measuring 6.3 on the Richter scale, and that it is killing thousands.
But we weren't thinking earthquake because everybody was so focused on what was going on top of the mountain that nobody was thinking about what was going on down below. And we were really scared, all of us, you know, to the point of almost panicking. I mean, this volcano, when it erupts, gives off gases and fragments of rock that are about 800 degrees Celsius. And it travels down the volcano really fast at about 100 kilometers an hour. So if you're in the direct path of that volcano, which we were that morning, we were only 7 kilometers away from the actual top of the volcano. I mean, there was no way we would have gotten out there alive. There was a point where I thought that that might be it. There was just that temporary moment, that mix of adrenaline and fear. Yeah, there was a moment where I thought, holy cow, this is it. I can't believe it. Our sound man is screaming at our fixer to go take the van and turn it around because we had to make a quick decision whether we were going to just jump into the van and speed away and try and beat whatever's going to come out of the volcano. And then you see him in the next shot running and grabbing the tripod and running towards the truck. And we're just sitting there, okay, a few more shots, do we get out of here? These people were racing to the village just down below and pick the people up and start evacuating the villagers right away because this was serious. And you can see the looks in the villagers' faces. I mean, the people that were coming out, that were being evacuated, old people, young kids, they all just were sitting there staring up at the mountain in disbelief and in fear. I mean, you could see the fear in their eyes. You could tell from looking at these people, and one man in particular who had just been evacuated from the village, he had been involved in the 1994 eruption. His village was directly in line, and he had horrible burns all over him. And he told us this is exactly what happened in 94.
I was shocked. Suddenly the ground was moving, so I just found something to hold on to. The government had told us there was evidence Mount Merapi was going to explode. I experienced this in 1994. A hot cloud came suddenly from the volcano. I passed out and woke up in the hospital days later. I was there for months.
You see the people in the observation post, you know, sitting there with their hands on their walkie-talkies, you know, just ready to bolt, actually. Word came through pretty quickly that there had actually been an earthquake.
Driving back to Jogjakarta, buildings that had been there just moments before are suddenly flattened. But the worst is yet to come.
And all of a sudden, all of this traffic, this swarm of traffic starts coming at us one way down the street, the wrong way. And it's hundreds of cars, buses, people honking their horns, screaming, police waving people. And our fixer beside me in the car, we were sitting in the van in the front seat together, starts yelling tsunami. These people were panicking. They thought that a tsunami was on the way. And we later learned that the initial radio broadcast after the earthquake indicated that there was a tsunami. All the people that were out on the coast, which is about 30 kilometers away, came rushing into the city. So all of a sudden, about 45 minutes after the quake, there's this massive pandemonium in the streets. It was just unbelievable.
No, let's get out of here. I don't want to die. Better to be on higher ground, isn't it?
Now what happened was, after a few minutes, we finally figured out, oh, well, let's turn on the radio. And sure enough, the radio started broadcasting. Everybody calm down.
Ya, informasikan seluruh warga di situ. Ya, jangan panik. Sekali lagi, jangan panik ya, Mas Eria. Oke, tenang, pasrah kepada Allah SWT, Tuhan yang Maha Kuasa. Ya. Oke, terima kasih, Mas Eria dari Tinggawangan.
So we actually then pulled over to the side of the road and jumped out and started taking pictures. And it was crazy. I mean, this went on for a good 15, 20 minutes, just this massive stampede. People just racing on foot, trying to jump onto buses, jumping into cars, doing whatever they could, just racing towards the mountain. The people that couldn't get out of the city fast enough, that weren't part of this initial swarm, thought best, I guess, to get to higher ground. So there were these scenes of people on bridges. You know, hundreds and hundreds of people sitting on bridges, figuring that, I guess if a tsunami's coming, the best place to be is higher ground. The problem with that was, it was an earthquake. And being on top of a bridge in an earthquake is not a great idea. And eventually the police were coming through and telling people to get off the bridges because, you know, who would have known if they were even structurally, you know, safe at that point. You can see when we're driving down the road, you can actually see cracks in the sidewalk. You can see the effect that the earthquake had had. Bridges were probably not the safest place to be.
At that point, we head to the center of Jogjakarta to see the damage. The destruction is evident immediately. The earthquake has left its mark. This man had been walking outside of the building he works at when the quake hit.
This morning, around this building, this is a normal duty for us. Suddenly, building like this, and all people become panic. What happened? And so when all the brick come falling down, everybody, 1 hour after that, all people said, "Oh, tsunami come!" Become panic again. People become panic. From there, oh, water coming from there. From there, people said, "Oh, water coming from there." Oh, panic.
We come across some bizarre scenes, like these people trying to free a motorcycle out from under a fallen electrical transformer. Early reports are starting to come in, indicating that several hundred people have been killed in the earthquake. That number soon grows to thousands. Our documentary crew is in Jogjakarta filming Mount Merapi, the most active and dangerous volcano in Indonesia, when the earthquake suddenly hits. Minutes after the quake, the city erupts in mayhem. People are fleeing to higher ground, fearing a tsunami.
No, let's get out of here. I don't want to die.
But it soon becomes clear that the hardest hit areas are outside the city.
We drove out to the coast. It was completely empty. Everybody had headed back to the city, heading towards higher ground. But we did come across a small village, and the first place we stopped, you could see a guy standing on top of what was left of his house. And we pulled over, and a man came over to meet us. He had a gash in the side of his head, and he invited us to come over and have a look at his house. His story was quite unbelievable.
You hurt yourself on the face?
Oh, yes. Brick.
A brick?
Yes.
So,
This is my son with me. I rescued him and
so tell me what happened. Were you asleep or?
no, after while cooking.
And tell me what happened. Everything shake or?
Oh yes, but very, very quickly. Only just 5 minutes.
Yes?
Yeah.
So explain what happened. What happened to your house while you were inside your house?
Oh yeah, shake. And then the wall break into pieces.
And what did you do?
I ran with my son.
Yes, where was he?
Watch television. Yeah.
He was watching television?
Yes, he was watching television. And my daughter was taking a bath. My wife was cooking.
Wow. You're lucky.
Yes, yes.
Well, as we were interviewing this, just actually wrapping up our interview with this man, all of a sudden we could see out of the corner of our eye a woman clearly dead, wrapped in a sheet.
You could tell me what she was, who was she?
She was my sister, my brother, and my nephew. 3 families.
3 people killed?
Yes.
I'm very sorry.
Thank you.
It was just absolutely shocking. He was just so, he just said it so matter-of-factly, but I'm sure the man was in shock. I'm sure he had no idea, and they were already getting ready. I mean, they were wrapping this woman already to bury her because Muslims bury their dead as quickly as possible. So, I mean, it was all just happening so quickly for them that I don't think it had actually registered. I'm sure we were the first TV crew just because we happened to be there doing something else, and it was just, you know, it was literally unfolding. We were reacting to it almost as quickly as they were. It was just disbelief, shock, and sadness. And then we turned around, and there's a woman standing there just looking at her house, which was just a pile of sticks at this point, and she tells us that her 7-year-old daughter and husband are buried under there. And it was overwhelming.
My husband and my young child are inside. They can't take them out because nobody's come to help yet. After I took my bath, I jumped over the brick fence and I met my older child. I didn't have time to look for my child. I just jumped out. I don't know the exact location of my younger child and my husband.
By now, the death toll is climbing. We head back towards Jogjakarta, where the hospitals are filling up.
The first thing that was really strange was we just walked right into the hospital, and everybody was out on the lawn. And I guess for good reason, because they were worried that another earthquake was gonna happen, or even, you know, severe enough aftershocks to bring that place down. But then when we walked around the corner, there was just this mass of humanity lying on mats on the floor, you know, people that were covered in blood, people that were seemingly unconscious, little kids, old people, a lot of people with fractures. I think that was the biggest injury suffered, you know, obviously people sitting in their homes that had collapsed on them, broken arms, broken legs, you know, bloodied heads, all sorts of terrible things. And the hospital was doing its best, but our fixer overheard 2 nurses in Indonesian saying that they'd already run out of oxygen. And I think what was happening was they were just trying to tend to people as best they could. I mean, it was more psychological counseling at this point than medical attention because there was just way too much happening. It was an overload for them.
Indonesia is a unique and beautiful place, made up of more than 18,000 islands. It's also situated in the most geographically volatile part of the planet, sandwiched between many tectonic plates.
Indonesia is a very tough place to live because they live in this very unstable location. The boundaries of plates, they are subject to repeated earthquakes and repeated volcanic eruptions. Combined with their climate, it's warm, it's rainy, that actually lends itself to massive landslides as a result of the volcanic rocks, which weather very easily and so are subject to, again, these kinds of incredible hazards.
We were on the island of Java, filming Mount Merapi, Indonesia's most dangerous volcano. On May 27, 2006, our 5th day of shooting, we witnessed firsthand the danger of living in this part of the world. We survived an earthquake measuring 6.3 on the Richter scale, but thousands did not.
The earthquake and volcanic activity in this area are related in the sense that they're all occurring along the subduction zone where the Australian plate is going underneath the Sunda plate.
Scientists say this quake was unusual in that it occurred only 10 to 15 kilometers beneath the ground.
This earthquake was called a strike slip. So essentially that is the two pieces of crust are moving past each other. And that's why it was very shallow. Subduction earthquakes tend to be much deeper. And as a result, a subduction earthquake of magnitude 6.3 would have been deeper. It would have been in the crust itself or on the crust. But this was at the surface, two plates sliding, two pieces of the crust sliding past each other. So shallow and violent.
Seismologists measured the earthquake as moderate, but the damage was catastrophic.
It occurred in and among one of the most densely populated places on Earth. And so it was also a shallow earthquake right underneath a dense population center. That's why it was so destructive and why there were so many fatalities.
We were about 25 kilometers from the quake's epicenter, in downtown Jogjakarta, which has a population of 3 million. That's the size of a large North American city. A nearby town, Bantul, took the brunt of the devastation. 80% of the fatalities came from there.
The damage was so great because, again, when you're in an area where you don't have very strong building codes, even smaller earthquakes can cause a lot of damage. And it also depends very much on the time of day. This earthquake happened in the early morning hours, so there were a lot of people that were asleep. They were inside their houses.
The people we spoke with couldn't remember an earthquake as severe in this specific region. But many of them are still coming to grips with the devastating earthquake that caused the tsunami off the coast of another Indonesian island, Sumatra, in December of 2004, killing more than 200,000.
The earthquake that produced the major tsunami in December of 2004 was associated with movement of the Indian plate underneath the island of Sumatra. That earthquake started off the northern tip of Sumatra and then ruptured north through the Nicobar and Andaman Islands, and it was a 9.2 earthquake involving slip of 20 or even as much as 30 meters of slip on the plate interface over a distance of 1,200 to maybe even as much as 1,500 kilometers length. The earthquake produced movement of the seafloor, which then pushed the water and started the tsunami. And in this case, it was a magnitude 6.3 within the crust, and probably because of its size and distance from the ocean, generated no tsunami whatsoever.
No tsunami, but for weeks the locals have been preparing for another potential disaster, the eruption of Mount Merapi. Mount Merapi has been erupting for millennia, killing thousands, inflicting horrible injuries and damage.
Killer volcano rumbles fitfully after its latest eruption. The entire top of the mountain went up with a flaming roar, pouring gases and volcanic ashes on the surrounding areas. The torrents of molten lava engulfed villages 3 miles from the crater. Army and police units evacuate thousands of inhabitants, providing them with food and emergency shelter. 25 persons are dead, scores injured. 7,000 were killed when Merapi erupted in 1930. history records another grim chapter of Java's most feared volcano.
Three of the most famous or well-known eruptions in the early 1930s, it erupted in a very large way with pyroclastic flows and dome collapse that killed over 1,000 people. Many small eruptions since then. In 1994, eruption was another large one that caused pyroclastic flows that annihilated part of one of the villages, killed over 50 people in that eruption.
We met up with Rudy Halamawan, whose house was in the direct path of the 1994 eruption. He was one of the lucky ones.
Tapi belum terlalu besar.
Around 10:45 in the morning, I heard rumbling from the top, and I didn't know what it was, so I looked for the source of the sound, and I found out it was a hot cloud. But it wasn't too big, so I moved to another place. Everybody was looking at the volcano. Everybody ran for safety, including me. We ran to the south, but I remembered I still had my family up there. My wife, my kids, and my parents. I went back home to let them know they should run for safety because I knew it was dangerous. I got there and we ran. But before we got very far, we felt this gust of wind. It was only for a second, but it was extremely hot. Then it turned dark, and we couldn't see anything. I was standing up, but then I felt pressure from all around me, and I ended up on the floor. It happened very fast. It didn't even go for 1 minute. I looked around, and everything was white and smoky. I thought it was a dream, but apparently it wasn't. I brought my kids and wife to the bottom where it was safe. They took us all to a hospital in Jogjakarta. But my mother, father, wife, and child all died. So from 5, there's only me left.
Rudy spent 50 days in the hospital where he was treated for severe burns. When he got out, he couldn't return home. The government declared his village off limits. It was too dangerous. So he moved a kilometer away from his old village. He still lives close to Mount Merapi and is very fearful of the latest eruptions.
My feeling with the disaster this year is probably the same as 1994. I am very traumatized, but I'm trying to put that aside. I have to keep on living.
That's the gamble that these villagers are willing to live with. We heard it time and time again. Early one morning, we visited the village of Barabadan, with Mount Merapi looming in the distance. Its bustling market as busy as ever. But it's not business as usual. Since Merapi started erupting, the alert level was raised to its highest, and people have only been allowed to stay during the day. At night, the village is evacuated. It makes for a very tense situation.
On Monday, I was doing business in another village when Merapi erupted. I saw so many people running from there with bikes and cars that I got scared. I got goosebumps.
As a normal human being, I'm scared when Merapi erupts. It's dangerous for people. But it is my duty as a soldier to help people. So if I run away, who is going to save the people? I am not here out of my own will. I am stationed here.
According to most volcanologists, people here have reason to be concerned.
Each volcano is unique, and we don't have a very good picture of the plumbing system itself underneath every single volcano, but those processes of bringing the magma closer to the surface is something that we have to understand better, and that's something that we're looking at and trying to forecast a little bit better. But in short, once the magma reaches the volcano itself, what you see on the surface, once it gets to that level, there's almost certainly an eruption that will happen. And what we're seeing now at Merapi is the top of that magma column, the top of that plumbing system is actually at the surface in the form of a lava dome.
And once a major eruption occurs, the fear is pyroclastic flow. the deadly hot combination of gas and rocks.
By the time they arrive at the lower slopes, if they are big enough, they can have speeds of maybe 100 kilometers per hour, have temperatures of several hundred degrees centigrade. They would incinerate anything that is in their way. They would blow over or even blow away whole houses, cars, and kill people and animals instantly. As recently as in 1994, such a bigger one of this, such a pyroclastic flow came down this valley next to that hill, overspilled the rim, and went into the village, and there was a wedding going on, and about 70 people were killed. People just disappeared. They were never found. Some of them, at least. They just were incinerated and probably are buried somewhere in the deposits of that flow.
We met one of the few survivors from that wedding. Mariotto lives with his wife Cassiem on a quiet street not far from Mount Merapi.
When it happened in 1994, I was going to another village to sell some vegetables to feed my family. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. My husband, Mariotto, was going to help out at my younger sister's wedding. He was asked to boil the water for the guests. At 11 o'clock, the disaster hit. When I got to the evacuation place, I was looking for Mariotto, but I couldn't find him. And apparently he couldn't run. The hot cloud knocked the house right on top of him, so the only way he could move was by slithering on the floor. They said the temperature was 860 degrees. There were about 25 in the house who were hit, but Mariotto was the only one who was still alive from the whole house that was at the wedding.
Mariotto was treated in hospital for 5 months. After that, he needed another 7 months of therapy.
Mariotto can't work properly like he used to. He hasn't worked since. So for the family needs and for the kids, I'm the only one who takes care of them.
Mount Merapi will erupt violently again. That is almost certain. In order to try and prevent another major disaster, seismologists, government officials, the police, and army have set up an elaborate communications and evacuation system. At the main seismographic lab in Jogjakarta, they are constantly monitoring the activity on Mount Merapi.
This is the signal of the pyroclastic flow, which now still happening at the summit of Merapi. And every day we can count more than 20, 30 pyroclastic flow per day. And we observe this pyroclastic flow from the seismograph.
When the activity increases, so does the magnitude of the signal, making it very easy to detect what is happening in real time.
All the needle is trembling, and this is the signal of pyroclastic flow. And since this morning we have a big signal in the morning, and you can see in the field on close to the volcano that's also many pyroclastic flow, and especially in the night you can see in the red glowing avalanches.
Information is also gathered from the front lines, the various observation posts set up in villages close to the volcano. These observation posts are manned 24 hours a day. They play a crucial role when an eruption occurs, sending back first-hand accounts to the main command and control center.
This machine's sensor is placed on top of the Barabadan post. It's about 2 kilometers from the summit.